copays, no deductibles, that covers all physical, mental, dental, long-term care with, as I said, not only no copays and no deductibles, but no premiums. It should be funded not by payroll taxes, but by highly graduated income and wealth taxes that fall entirely on the top 1% and extended down to the top 10%. We can end federal taxation of the bottom 90% of this country and guarantee quality healthcare to everyone. And if we have a single payer healthcare system, we maintain choice. You go to any doctor, any healthcare facility you want. We're in a position to get rid of the bloated overhead of a multiplicity of private insurance programs and their super salaries for CEOs, advertising costs, dividends to stockholders. We can negotiate with United Strength to lower costs in line with the rest of the world and cut our health expenditures in half and save $1.7 trillion. We should no longer be talking about Medicare expansion, Medicaid expansion, or retaining Obamacare. We should talk about instituting a single payer healthcare system, Medicare for all. And we need to do it right away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winfield. The question to you, Ms. Johnson, Shealy, again, what are your thoughts about expanding Medicaid in Georgia, and how would you influence a Republican governor to expand Medicaid?
Yeah, I am going to piggyback off Richard here with this one. Yeah, we are. We need Medicare for all. We need to expand Medicaid. Healthcare is not a conversation I think we as Democrats need to continue to have. We understand we're all on the same page with this. But your question, the second part of it is how do we negotiate with these Republican governor? Politics is a game, and we have to figure out where that middle ground is, what it is they want, and how we get beyond the bickering that tends to happen, and how do we, it's just a negotiation at this point. I don't think that we should continue to have the conversation about, why, and is how we get it done. And at this point, we just need to get it
done. Okay, thank you. Ms. Jackson, question to you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I agree that we need to move towards a single payer system, but in the meantime, because that's going to take some time to make that happen. So in the meantime, we really need to be strategic in terms of how do we entertain and get the Republican Party to support Medicaid for all. I think that the results of we're seeing as results from this the coronavirus pandemic should help serve as a motivating factor for some of the Republicans. Ideally, it would be great to replace all of them so that we have people who are in office that understand the need to provide healthcare as a basic right, and it's not something that people should consider to be a privilege. And so it's really about sitting down and putting pressure, but ultimately, as elected officials, we can't do the job by ourselves. We really need to have the community support and engagement to really put pressure on those representatives who are blocking their access to the really vital service. So it's about engaging the community to help push with standing behind the leaders, taking a strong stand and not being wishy-washy about the need for having universal health care.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tarver, the question to you, sir.
Well, Representative Jackson, I think you kind of framed your question as it relates to our current environment in the midst of a pandemic. And
correct.
One of the things that we have to recognize is that whether we agree that these systems, Medicaid, Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, are the best that we could do right now, they are what we have to address the issue right now. And obviously, as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, the Affordable Care Act was premised on the expectation that states like Georgia would expand Medicaid, access to Medicaid and Medicare, which Georgia has not done. We have to keep in mind that millions of people across this country rely on those programs right now for whatever healthcare that they receive. Certainly, access to healthcare could be improved. There are things that we could approach differently as it relates to providing adequate healthcare to those that we serve. But the reality is that that I'm not supportive of anything that's going to result in demolishing what's in place for so many millions of people across the country without something suitable to replace it. I agree with the Honorable Deborah Jackson in her comment that this is what we have right now, and I think it's our obligation to make sure that we take the resource that's available right now and build upon it to make it better. It doesn't mean that at some place down the road, when we identify a process that would provide better access, greater access, enhance the services that are available to those that we serve, that we wouldn't embrace something like that. But right now, this is what we have. One of the things that I noticed is that during the pandemic, we talk about the thousands of people who have lost their jobs and they've had to resort to the Affordable Care Act. I would not want to be in a situation where I'm telling those folks that I'm taking one option, maybe an inadequate option, but taking one option that they have for themselves and their family, and we're going to eliminate that because it's not the most perfect option. It's what we have right now. I would like to build upon and fortify those options to make sure that we're providing for the needs of folks right now, today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, the next question, we'll start off with Ms. Jackson. As recent as last week, Georgia's governor went on a statewide tour to encourage Georgians the use of wearing their mask, but continued to refuse to issue an executive order to mandate the wearing of masks. If you were a United States Senator today, how would you use your voice in this discussion about the use of mandatory wearing of the mask, maintaining social distance, sheltering in place? And then the second part to this question that we are starting to hear a lot of parents ask about, what are the guidelines should exist in order for their children to return to school? Again, we'll start the question off with Ms. Jackson.
All right, thank you. My position would be, I think that there needs to be a statewide mandate for using masks as well, particularly using masks while you're out in public, as well as the importance of social distancing. And people raise the issue of the reluctance to have a mandate because it might be difficult to enforce. I think the goal of having the mandate is that people would take it much more seriously and understand that there is a need to do it. Some people have gotten into this false dichotomy of, well, mandating a mask is going to be a violation of people's constitutional right. And that is not the case. The purpose of the mask is to help protect the health of other people, family, friends, and those that we are interacting with. And so the governor took a partial step, but I think he fell short of not taking the step of actually mandating it. So as the US Senator, I would take a firm position that this needs to be mandated for the safety of the community. As relates to going back to school, I think it needs to be evaluated in the context. I mean, I think everyone really understands that there clearly is value in our children returning back to the classroom, but it must be done in a way that is safe, not only for the students, but as well as the staff and other personnel that are part of the whole educational system. With the remote learning, it has put some of our members of the community at a disadvantage because they don't have the access to the internet service that they need to be able to do remote learning. So we really have to look at how do we gradually allow the students to go back into the classroom in a way that is safe for everyone that's involved. Because our children really are our priority and must take steps to make sure that they are protected.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Winfield, question to you.
Yeah, I mean, the questions you're dealing with really can't be solved on a state-by-state basis. They have to be handled nationally. Right now, for example, in Georgia, the number of coronavirus cases has gone up 245% since our so-called reopening. In South Carolina, they've gone up 1,000%. In Florida, well over 1,000%. We can't protect ourselves by taking initiatives simply in Georgia. These are national questions. We need national mandates, not just on wearing masks, but on having an army, a sufficient army of contact tracers. So everyone who tests positive will be subject to contact tracing and mandatory quarantining with paid quarantining so people can afford to do it. And we have to have frequent testing. Germany is trying to reopen its public schools. And in doing it, they are having twice a week COVID tests of every student and every staff, and then having contact tracing and quarantining. We have to do something similar if we're going to be able to open our schools nationwide, and that requires national funding. Because, you know, we're talking about what could amount to a super spreader catastrophe in reopening schools and universities unsafely. And that means we have to ensure also that there is daycare available if people are going to be able to go back to work. And of course, we do need a permanent ban on evictions, foreclosures, and utility turnoffs, because where are our kids going to be studying if they have no roof over their heads? And 30 million households are facing homelessness at the end of this month when rents and mortgage payments come due. We have to act nationally, immediately. The solution cannot be provided by our state governments. It has to be done at a national level. And that's why we're running for Senate.
Right.
Not for local office or statewide office.
Thank you, Mr. Winfield. Again, the question still goes to Ms. Johnson-Shealy, but let me just reiterate for the sake of clarity. If you are a U.S. Senator today, so you're right, this is a national question. So if you were a U.S. Senator today, how would you use your voice to deal with mandating the use of wearing of the mask, maintaining social distance, sheltering in place, and then what guidelines should exist in order for our children to return to school? Ms. Johnson-Shealy.
Well, I really am somewhere in the middle with this. I understand that, like I said, we have to live with this virus we don't have a vaccine for. The flu has been around for hundreds of years, and it is, you know, come and gone in different forms for, thousands of years. Thousands of years, the flu has been around. So mandating masks is not something that I would do. I would encourage it. I would ask that people, be safe, because we have to maintain our safety and everybody else's safety with this. I would encourage the social distancing. I would encourage the sheltering in place. And as far as the guidelines, we have virtual, the same way we're doing this forum online. There's virtual, there's digital. We have the technology now has, given us the opportunity to go to school and not have to be in a physical building. So we have options. So I'm somewhere in the middle with this. I would not mandate the mask. I think there's a bigger conversation around this virus that I don't think that we're having. I do believe that this virus is real. I do believe that this virus is a threat. I do believe that we need to be safe, but I think we also have to figure out how to navigate now that we are in the midst of this pandemic, and how do we continue to live? Because I don't think that we should shut down again. I do not believe that we should. I think we should figure it out and do what it takes to continue to live and move forward. So mandating is not where that wouldn't be something that I would do.
Okay. Mr. Tarver, question to you, sir.
Yes, as a U.S. Senator, the first thing I would do to use my voice would be to depoliticize this discussion about the appropriate response to the coronavirus. And again, I would echo that I would emphasize that some of what we're seeing right now is just reckless and completely outrageous in terms of folks associating one solution or one potential solution with their particular partisan affiliation. So I would certainly beat the drum against politicizing this issue. I would certainly encourage and use my voice to support the scientific approach to how best to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. Certainly, one solution is not going to be acceptable for all of us. We see that as we look internationally. Different countries are approaching the situation in different ways. I think I saw last night on the news the governor of the president of Brazil is still counting hydrochloroquine as something that we have discounted in this country. So I think that we should certainly look at the various options based upon what our experts are telling us. My wife is a pediatrician, and one of the things that we laugh about is that when we talk about mandating that we're going to use masks and we mandate reopening schools by a certain date in August, who's going to take a 5 or 6 year old and make sure that child keeps a mask on all day? It's probably going to be impossible. So we're going to have some options, some alternatives to this notion that we can just fix the problem by saying or by mandating that everybody wears a mask or that everybody engages in social distancing. We all, I know I am a product of the public school system. There simply is not enough space within the current configuration of our public education system to enforce social distancing at our education level. And if we were in an environment where we had tremendous resources, like some would suggest, we would spend the money as necessary to provide all that we need. But we all know that during this economic downturn, the resources are simply not there. And the question then lies whether or not we as a nation want to go into more debt in order to address what we hope will be a short-term situation. So I think that I would use my voice to urge that we depoliticize the situation. I would urge that we stop some of the reckless, outrageous conduct that we're seeing from some of our leaders in Washington and both at the state level. And I would urge us to partner with our experts who are currently in office right now and rely on the advice that they're giving us for getting through this pandemic.
Okay. And this, thank you, Mr. Tarver. This will be the last question as it relates to the coronavirus. And again, you only have 2 minutes to respond. And in speaking about debt, this question is around the stimulus. And some of you already mentioned the PPP and others. There have been trillions of dollars in stimulus packages, and significant majority of those funds are not assisting working families in Georgia. What is your perspective in how to assist working families and small businesses with these stimulus packages that are currently being executed and the next round of stimulus dollars? And we'll start this question off with Ms. Johnson Shealy. Again, the question is around the trillions of dollars in stimulus package, and what would you do or suggest if you were a U.S. Senator in helping working families and small businesses?
It should have been first on the list. Those dollars went to big businesses and big corporations, but small businesses should have been first on the list. Working families should have been first on the list. The most vulnerable should have been first on the list. We have our priorities in the wrong place. And I don't really have much of an answer beyond that, because I just think that we spent money and we gave money to the wrong people. We can't continue to think that if we feed the top, it's going to trickle down to the bottom, because it doesn't. We have to really be intentional as we write policy and as we move forward as a nation with addressing our working families, our small businesses first. So that's my short answer.
Okay. Ms. Jackson, the question to you, ma'am.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the small businesses and working families should have been the first priority. I think that the unemployment benefits that have been provided need to be extended as this pandemic continues, because people should not have to choose between going back to work and their health. Unfortunately, the way the program was developed was that, people who really didn't need the money were able to access it. So it shows that there was a lack of real oversight being put into place to make sure that the money was directed to those who really needed the most. So rather than looking at paying the employers, I think the employees should be paid directly. So unemployment is one way of doing that. Many small businesses are less than 5 people, that they would have an opportunity to receive funding, without going through a lot of red tape. To operate a business, most folks have to have some type of business license or some type of certification. So there's a way of verifying that there is a bona fide business that exists. And again, I think that there should be additional stimulus checks that are sent to families, and that needs to be going on an ongoing basis. Because again, as I said previously, this pandemic has really exposed what many of us realized had always been in place, but I think there's a broader audience now of how fragile many people are, even though they are working. And so, we have the evictions that are be coming up, the foreclosures. And so we really have to address this situation and not look at business as usual, but make sure that there really is a priority given to those who are most in need for a change.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tarver, question to you, sir.
I think clearly one of the things that has been most evident about the coronavirus pandemic is that the systems, the structure that we have in place to address times such as this have been proven themselves to be inadequate. What I would do differently would be to shore up those systems. I think that the money, stimulus dollars, should be funneled to those agencies that are currently in place to provide for the needs of those who rely on the social safety net. We saw with the issue of unemployment compensation, that's one area where funds were administered by the various agencies across the country to process unemployment applications, to process the applications for the additional unemployment enhancement. And even for those systems that were in place, they proved to be inadequate simply because of the large number of people. What I'd like to see happen is that we shore up systems like our departments of labor in Georgia to make sure that they are adequately staffed and adequately funded to make so that they can touch and receive the requests from all those folks who are affected. But I'd also like to see us use other social structure systems that are in place to meet the needs of those that are most vulnerable. We see that in the case of the pandemic, African Americans, people. I'm sorry, Mr. Have I exceeded my 2 minutes?
Yes. But I do appreciate your response.
Right.
The question to you, Mr. Winfield.
Yeah, I think we have to take measures that although they begin as emergency measures, should become permanent fixtures of a just society. We need to wipe out unemployment and poverty income by right now providing everyone who can work with a job provided by the government as employer of last resort. And we have to provide equivalent replacement income of a fair wage to anyone who cannot work. And that also would include people who are small business people, et cetera. We need to immediately put a permanent ban on evictions, foreclosures, and utility turnoffs, as well as on repossessions. And if we allow everyone to be solvent and have a guaranteed income, then we can have mandatory payment rescheduling. We need to immediately provide health insurance coverage to everyone because millions of people are losing their jobs, often losing their health insurance at the same time. We need to right now eliminate that problem, and we can simply do it by extending Medicare coverage to all uninsured health expenses. And these are measures that are going to transform our nation for the better. They are now a matter of life and death in preventing destitution, and we need not worry about deficits because our Federal Reserve can instantaneously credit the Treasury with the resources needed for these public investments, and we can avoid hyperinflation as long as we control interest rates and use this money in a productive way. To be a deficit hawk at a time of a worldwide depression and think in terms of austerity is a recipe for disaster.
Okay. All right. So that concludes the coronavirus pandemic questions. And so that's the reason why we gave you 2 minutes to respond, because this, again, all Georgians are talking about it. The next round, I would refer to as our lightning round. It's around democracy and rights. Democracy and rights. You only have 60 seconds to respond. And again, we'll start off with ladies first. We'll start off with Ms. Jackson. In the last few weeks, we have been witnessing peaceful protests for the most part. And we want to know, have you been adding your voice to the debate about the reasons for the social unrest that we all have been witnessing? And if so, how and why? I'm starting with Ms. Jackson.
All right. Yeah, I have definitely been adding my voice to the social unrest that we have witnessed going on. As a long-term community activist, the issues that our young people primarily have been raising are issues that I have dedicated my professional as well as community activism to. Here in the Lithonia area, several of the churches got together and we did a caravan for justice throughout the area as a way of joining, because we had many seniors that wanted to participate. We thought that that was a safe way for people to be involved and engaged. The question about Black Lives Matter really goes to the heart of recognizing the humanity of Black people, which was not done in the founding documents, and our time that we begin to put policies in place that recognize our full humanity.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. The question to you, Mr. Winfield.
Yeah, I mean, if we're really going to solve the entrenched racial disadvantage and the systemic racism that perpetuates and intensifies it, we have to bring to Washington the measures for a new social bill of rights that will remove the situation that keeps racial as well as gender disadvantage in place. And that means we have to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to employment at a fair wage or equivalent replacement income. Everyone has access to quality healthcare, legal representation, housing, education at all levels, no matter how much wealth they have. When we enforce these social rights, which comprise the unfinished business of the civil rights movement, we are going to be in a position to lift the boot of history off of everyone's neck. And that's how we genuinely affirm that Black Lives Matter. Nothing less.
Thank you, Mr. Winfield. Mr. Tarver, a question to you, sir.
I think I understood the question, and you wanted to know what we have done personally or can you restate that question?
Yes, I can restate it, but the answer to your question is yes. In these last few weeks, we have been witnessing peaceful protests for the most part. Have you been adding your voice to this debate, and if so, how and why?
I certainly have added my voice to the debate. It was an opportunity for me to use my tremendous experience as a former federal prosecutor and U.S. attorney to speak to some of the issues that have been in the media, the issues that folks are protesting regarding. I was one of the first in this race to speak to the situation in Brunswick, Georgia regarding Ahmaud Arbery, and how it was outrageous that it had taken so long when there were identified subjects to charge somebody for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. I was also able to use my experience both as a legislator and as a federal prosecutor to address some of the excuses that have been raised for the lack of action and the slowness of action in responding to the violations of civil rights that we've seen in multiple jurisdictions across the country. And I've done that by through written materials, through social media posts, and through other venues that are available.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson Shealy.
I don't just talk about it. I'm all about it. I actually got in the streets. I get in the streets. I'm an activist. I actually host an internet broadcast where we talk about race, racism, and race relations. So I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. And I have a plan for reparations on my website. So when it comes to everything that's happening today, I am not just talking. We actually have a plan for reparations.
Okay. The next question, we'll start off with Mr. Tarver. Police brutality has been a main reason for majority of this peaceful protest, and Black Lives Matter movement has been the champion for the change that citizens are desiring. What are your thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement? Starting with Mr. Tarver.
I think the Black Lives Matter movement is long overdue. At this point in time, it seems like we've gotten enough folks interested to actually draw attention to the issue of police brutality, excessive force. Those issues are not new to this country. They've been discussed and talked about for decades. This is the first time in my lifetime where I've seen that action has actually been done, where legislation has actually been proposed to in Congress to do something about it. So I'm enthusiastic about it and certainly support it 100%. I may not support each of the components the individual components that you hear, but certainly recognize as a former prosecutor that we must do something about excessive force. We must do something about the abuse of power and authority that has happened on a regular basis in relationship to our conduct between law enforcement and citizens. So certainly, I think that it's something that's long overdue, and that we should support it in any way we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The question to you, Mr. Winfield.
Yeah, I think the Black Lives Matter movement fully recognizes that police brutality that disproportionately affects African Americans is just the tip of the iceberg of systemic racism. Indeed, we have to take action with regard to how police operate. We need to make them fully accountable and fully transparent. We need to have federal investigations of all police killings of civilians. We need to end the militarization of police departments. We actually should disarm all police of lethal weapons on ordinary patrol. And of course, to be able to do that, we also have to get rid of privately possessed guns in all public spaces. And the only 4 places where people should have guns are in their home, unloaded, locked up in their cars, or in firing ranges or in hunting grounds. But we need to focus upon the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. As Martin Luther King said, without a job and income, you have neither life nor liberty, nor the ability to pursue happiness. We need to have a new Bill of Social Rights, and that is going to be what will provide the ultimate permanent remedy to the devaluing of Black lives.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jackson, question to you, ma'am.
Yes, I would say that the current Black Lives Movement is really just the latest iteration of the struggle for Black dignity and humanity. I mean, since we arrived on these shores in 1619, we have been fighting for and taking the position that Black lives do matter. And so part of their call is focusing around reforming the police system that we have. Clearly, police brutality needs to be brought to an end. We need to end chokeholds and any other form of police brutality. The fact that people are debating whether or not to ban chokeholds does not make any sense at all. And so fundamentally, yes, Black
lives. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Ms. Shealy, question to you, ma'am.
Black Lives Matter is timely. It has brought attention to police brutality, but ADOS, the American Descendants of Slavery, is where we talk about solving the problems. This is systemic, it's generational, and we got to get beyond, we got to move forward. And when you talk about the history of this country, from slavery to black codes, the convict leasing, the Jim Crow, the no Green New Deal, no GI Bill, redlining, war on drugs, mass incarceration, now COVID-19. We got to talk about how we get, how we solve the problems of Black America and its reparations. So ADOS, the American Descendants of Slavery, and addressing that 2.6% of the wealth of the 13% of us is all we have as a people. We got a lot of work to do. So reparations is the conversation that I hope that we're going to have here.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding we got Mr. Warnock. Is Mr. Warnock there? Can someone unmute Mr. Warnock so we can add him to the conversation?
Hi, this is his staff. He is actually on, but he's not added on to the host link. So someone needs to let him in. He's been waiting for like 15 minutes.
Okay. Madam Chair, can someone assist Mr. Warnock? And once he comes on, we'll acknowledge him and include him in the conversation. We'll continue while they work that technical difficulties out with Mr. Warnock. The question, we'll start off with Mr. Tarver. Voter rights is another significant topic that Georgians are concerned about. How would you add your voice to this discussion, and what are your thoughts as it relates to the voting rights in Georgia? Mr. Tarver, start. Mr. Tarver, you're on mute, sir.
Voter suppression is.
There you go.
You got me? All right. Voter
Yes, I can hear you now.
is an issue that's of great concern to all of us. And we see it in many different ways. We have seen it most recently as it relates to the voting by mail issue that's discussed. We see it in this race, this special election, whereby decisions were made that were arguably partisan in nature, that has resulted in confusion to the voting population. We have a special election that's scheduled on the same day as the general election that doesn't have a primary. We have a primary intervening. There are a number of people who are interested, who have a direct interest in this race, who are confused because they don't know when to vote for the race, who's running. I think that falls in the voter suppression category as well, and that we should do all that we can to make sure that the greatest amount of access is available for voting, but also that we do it in a way that people understand and we can get to the
Right. So on the top link, how do you change it to a speaker? I'll give you the code. So you have to sign off again, and then
okay, there we go. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Tarver, 10 seconds. You have 10 seconds to finish your thought.
That much I can do with 10 seconds, but I will certainly say that voter suppression is something that's broader than what's being discussed currently, and that we need to do all that we can to make sure that neutral, non-biased individuals make decisions regarding access to voting and voting rights in the state of Georgia.
Okay. Ms. Jackson, the question to you, ma'am.
Yes, the right to vote is a basic and fundamental right. So there needs to be adequate funding provided so that we are expanding polling places rather than reducing polling places. The fact that people had to wait in line for up to 7 hours is absurd and clearly represents voter suppression. The fact that some people want to have the access to be able to vote by mail, that should be facilitated as opposed to obstacles being placed in the way. So many people want to actually go and vote in person, and so we need to have adequate facilities to allow them to do that in a safe manner.
Okay. Mr. Winfield, the question to you, sir.
Yes, we need to overcome all forms of voter suppression. In the current pandemic, we have to ensure that there can be 100% mail-in voting, so no one has to risk their lives in trying to go to the polls. Registration should be as automatic as possible. We need to end depriving any citizen of the right to vote. All felons should have the right to vote, as they do in better, more responsible democracies. And that means nearly 6 million people who are predominantly people of color who have been disenfranchised. We need to have the right to vote, a permanent attachment to every citizen of this country. And we need to give statehood to DC and offer statehood to all of our territories, unless they want to become independent, because that's another voter suppression involving approximately 7 million people who not accidentally happen to be largely people of color.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Winfield. Ms. Johnson-Shealy, question to you, ma'am.
Yes, Ed mentioned being confused, and Richard mentioned the risk, but we got to give people a reason to vote. You know, people have been led astray, promises that weren't kept. People are tired of going to the polls and getting nothing in exchange for that vote. And voting is an exchange. So when people go to the polls, they want something for it. So we need to give people a reason to go vote. And I echo all of their comments, but we need to take it a bit further. And we have to give people need a reason to go to the polls to vote.
Okay, thank you. The next question, again, 1 minute to respond. We'll start off with Ms. Jackson. Also under, women's rights are also under assault. What would you do to protect and preserve the rights of women, starting with the more recent attacks by Republicans, Roe v. Wade, starting with Ms. Jackson?
Yes, I believe that the holdings of Roe v. Wade actually need to be codified into law. And so to strengthen them and to rule out the opportunity for reactionary legislatures to put limits on women's right to reproduce. It is a fundamental right. The rights of women's body needs to be determined by the woman and her healthcare provider, and not legislatures making decisions that have nothing to do with it. So I would move for the codification of the findings of Roe versus Wade, that reproductive rights are fundamental and basic rights.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson-Shealy, question to you, ma'am.
Elect more women. We need more women to run. We need more women to serve. We need more women in office. We need more women in these powerful positions so that we can make sure that we're represented. This is my body, and I should decide what happens with my body. So definitely, we need more women to run and serve and be a part of the process.
Okay, Mr. Winfield, question to you, sir.
Yeah, we need to really uphold full reproductive freedom. That involves, on the one hand, ensuring the right to abortions and for it to be fully paid for by Medicare. Also, all contraceptives should be fully paid for by Medicare. But in addition, we have to make it possible for any woman and any parent to have the children they want to have. And that requires that we afford everyone economic independence through guaranteed jobs and equivalent replacement income, paid child and elder care, $900 child allowances, and paid family leave, all of which will make it possible for women and parents in general to have children when they want. And it will end up that by having true reproductive freedom, we will reduce to a minimum actual abortions.
Okay, thank you.
We'll no longer have
Mr.
the
Tarver,
need to have them as they do today.
Thank you, Mr. Winfield. Mr. Tarver, question to you.
The first thing I do as U.S. Senator for Georgia is I would fully support the reenactment, extension of the Violence Against Women Act. I think that any time that there are allegations of violence against women, that they should receive the full protection of the law, and they should be investigated and addressed to the extent that our law provides. The other thing that I would do is protect women's health issues, to remove government from the decisions that women have as it relates to their health, both reproductive and other issues, and would certainly support those two. I think those are the two primary issues that we face as it relates to women's health issues in the country, but would certainly support the Violence Against Women Act, and also would support women's reproductive health freedom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Dr. Raphael Warnock. Good morning, Dr. Warnock. If you could, sir, take 3 minutes to introduce yourself, and then I'll address the question to you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you so very much. It's wonderful to be here with the Fayette County Democrats. I apologize for my tardiness. Apparently, we were having some technical difficulties, but wonderful to be here with you. I'm Raphael Warnock. I'm running for the United States Senate. It is a part of my lifelong commitment to the work of service and justice making, which is why I've been engaged for years in the work of healthcare reform, voting rights, criminal justice reform, I've been someone who has preached and worked on all of these issues from my pulpit and in the community. I am a strong supporter of a woman's right to choose, which is why I have the endorsement of Planned Parenthood in this race and NARAL. This is work that I've continued to do. I also think it's important for us to address the issue of women's maternal health and infant mortality. The United States of America has a maternal death rate that outpaces other large industrialized modern nations. And Georgia leads the pack, and Black women especially, 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than their white counterparts. So I've long fought for health care, and I've been arrested in the state capitol in the governor's office fighting for us to expand Medicaid so that poor women and so that working people can have access to the same health care that others have access to. And I'll be a champion for this and so many other issues in the United States Senate. But again, it's wonderful to be here with you and happy to talk about these issues further.
Thank you, Dr. Warnock. And the question to you as well, sir. In addition to voter rights, women's rights are also under assault. What would you do to protect and preserve the rights of women, especially as Republicans continue to attack Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, in many ways, Georgia has been a ground zero and a battleground state around these issues of choice. And so I want to be very clear that I will be unequivocal in my commitment to a woman's right to choose. This has long been my position. I'll be a champion for it in the state, and it is a part of my ongoing commitment to healthcare in general. I believe that healthcare is a human right. And that it's something that a country as rich as ours ought to provide all of its citizens. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of Planned Parenthood and NARAL because they know of my long-term work on this issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're down to the last question before we do final thoughts. And this last question is a 30-second response. One of the many duties of a United States Senator is to vote on a Supreme Court justice. If you were a senator, which justice you would have either voted for or voted against that currently is a Supreme Court justice? And we'll start with Mr. Warnock.
Listen, there are a number of concerns on that court. But certainly Brett Kavanaugh never would have seen the light of day. And if I had anything to do with it, we're here talking about women's right to choose, and we're talking about women's rights in general. And there are a number of issues there. It's unfortunate that he's there. And I certainly would have voted against him, which is why I think this Senate race is critically important. Democrats must win control of the Senate. Not just for the Supreme Court, but the federal judiciary. Donald Trump has now appointed about 1/4 of the federal judiciary. So we had better figure out how to win this seat as Democrats so that we can really preserve a range of rights for our citizens, for our children in the next generation, the next 20 to 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson-Shealy, question to you, ma'am.
So yes, the notorious RBG Ginsburg, I would definitely have voted for her. And Kavanaugh, like Raphael said, he wouldn't have seen the light of day. You're right.
All right. Mr. Winfield, question to you.
Yeah, the only Supreme Court justices currently on that bench who I think I would have voted for when they first came up are the 3 women, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Ginsburg. But I think we also have to think about reforming the structure of the Supreme Court. We should no longer have life terms. We should have fixed terms, and we should have a staggered way of recycling our chief justices so that no particular administration can stuff the court with its own lackeys. I think that's crucial.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Jackson, question to you, ma'am.
Yes, I would have definitely supported each of the three women justices that were just named, Sotomayor, Ginsburg, and but I definitely would not have voted for Brett Kavanaugh for the reasons that have been stated.
Okay. Mr. Tarver, question to you, sir.
I certainly think that all that's been said about Justice Kavanaugh doesn't need to be repeated any longer. We all know the history of that appointment, and that's certainly one that's questionable that I certainly would not have supported as a U.S. Senator. I agree that we need to remove the politics from the process of the appointment of our Supreme Court justices and also the appointment of our circuit judges across the country. And so I would certainly consider Richard's idea of staggered terms for our Supreme Court justices, and also to make sure that we have a system in place, a neutral system that would ensure that they're both qualified and certainly have the credentials necessary to serve the federal judiciary.
Okay, thank you. The last question is, before final thoughts, starting with Mr. Winfield, climate control. Do you believe in climate control? Yes or no? If so, why?
Yes, I think yes, there is an overwhelming scientific consensus that unless we stop the increase of carbon in our atmosphere by 2030, we are on the path to irreversible change that is going to torment humanity for thousands of years to come. So we need to think of a Green New Deal and think of 2030 as the due date for eliminating the fossil fuel industry and entirely replacing it with green energy. And we can make this happen justly with no one suffering job losses, thanks to a federal job guarantee that will keep those who lose their jobs in the fossil fuel industry.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, question to you, ma'am.
Yes, we definitely need to support policies that would address climate change. There needs to be taxes on those industries that are polluting not just our environment, but is creating an impact on people's health and general well-being. It doesn't make any sense for the country to continue to be a major polluter and just representing a small part of the world's population. So we definitely need to follow the science, put programs in place that will expand access to new jobs that protect the environment as well as protect people's health.
Okay. Mr. Warnock, question to you, sir.
Climate change is a moral catastrophe as well as a growing scourge on humanity. And I think the COVID-19 challenge is sort of an example that gives us a lens through which we can think about what it means to live in a world where we're afraid to go outside. I think this is a moment in which we can think about the catastrophe that we are facing. I think that a good indicator of what a person will do when they serve in office is what they were doing before they served in office. And I've been working on all of these issues for years, including climate change, which is why Reverend William Barber and Vice President Al Gore and I had a large multi-faith service at my church last year, focused on this issue, raising it as an issue, as an economic issue, as a healthcare issue, and also as a moral issue. And I'll be speaking forcefully to this issue as a United States Senator if I'm honored to represent the people of Georgia.
Okay. Ms. Johnson-Seely, question to you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. So you said 30 seconds. I'm gonna make it less than that because I know everybody's time is precious. So yes, I am a strong advocate for addressing climate change. Global warming is a problem and we need green new energy. We need green new jobs. So yes.
Thank you. Mr. Tarver, question to you.
Certainly climate change is important. It's one of the planks on my platform as living in a state like Georgia where the agriculture is our #1 economic driver for our state. We need to follow the science. We should resist any efforts to make this issue political. And I would be an advocate for doing all that we can to limit the impacts of climate change on the environment in our state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, the final question is this. You have a minute to respond, and we'll start with Ms. Johnson Shealy. Why are you, ma'am, the best candidate to become Georgia's United States Senator?
I'm actually gonna if you don't mind, I need to make this my closing statement as well. I actually have another
Sure.
forum that I need to be a part of, but I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, I'm an author, I'm an entrepreneur. My heart is to serve. Like I said, this is not my first run, my second run, my third run. This is actually my fourth run for office, and I'm committed to all Georgians. I have a plan for reparations that, you know, we talk about the problems that ail this country, and right now we have to get to the root of it, and the root of it is the repair that needs to happen for Black America. So I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. I am your candidate for the United States Senate, and I want to thank you, Fayette County Democrats, for hosting this great forum today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson Shealy. Mr. Tarver, question to you, sir.
I'm too going to need to make this my final response as I have another commitment as well. But I will say that I understand the importance of honorable collaboration. And I have worked throughout my professional and public career in working with whoever's available to accomplish the best results on behalf of the community. I don't think that we in Georgia can allow the state to be represented by individuals who have personal commitments or private interests that may be a conflict for those in the state that which they represent. And so I would urge us to look at the credentials of those who have offered themselves for this U.S. Senate position. I agree with Reverend Warnock in that you look to your past behavior in terms of what you can expect from in terms of future output. And I think that I have the credentials, the experience that will show you that I can provide bold leadership for the state that will emphasize the needs of all Georgians and will promote Georgia values. But thank you very much for allowing me to participate this morning. And I look forward to further dialogue regarding the issues that we face in this Senate race. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarver. The question to you, Mr. Winfield.
The reason to vote for me is that I am the only candidate running for Senate who's advocating the full job guarantee social rights agenda. I'm alone in advocating a federal job guarantee that will wipe out unemployment and will be tied to a fair minimum wage, not a living wage, but a fair one starting at $20 an hour. I'm the only one standing up for genuine employee empowerment with mandatory unionization in every workplace with multiple employees and for worker co-determination on corporate boards. I'm the only candidate for really balancing work and family with free public child and elder care, $900 monthly child allowances. I'm the only candidate for complete federal financing of public education, completely eliminating student debt and having not just free tuition, but stipends at all public institutions of higher learning. And I'm the only candidate for getting money entirely out of our legal system by not only abolishing cash bail, for-profit prisons and probation services, and plea bargaining, but also having legal care for all, which will fully cover all personal expenses in civil and criminal cases. This is a recipe for a new birth of freedom. It is our escape from the disasters we are now facing, and the voters need to look at the alternative that I am offering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winfield. Ms. Jackson, a question to you, ma'am.
Okay, and this will be my closing statement as well. But I want to thank the Fayette County Democratic Committee for this opportunity to have a dialogue this morning. As a former mayor and elected official, I have the experience that is needed to take Georgia forward. It is very important that we look at people's qualifications because currently show that we need people not just with ideas, but people that actually have experience and ideas, and looking at what work they have actually done. I think people show you who they are based on what their experience and what their work has actually been. So in terms of the issues that are important to our community, economic security, job security, housing security, food security, climate improvement, these are all things that I have worked on throughout my professional and political career. And so I would be a strong advocate for the citizens of Georgia and represent them very proudly and take those positions when they are not always popular, but to do what is in the best interest of the community. So I ask for your support as we move forward through this campaign to elect the correct leadership for the state of Georgia. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you. I want to first thank all of our panelists for attending this morning. I want to ask Reverend Warnock if he has a few more minutes to answer some questions that we asked the other candidates earlier. Is that okay with you?
I'm challenged. I've got another appointment at 10:30. I think we're all probably probably rushing to the same appointment, I'm guessing. And
Yes.
I actually just got an emergency call that I'm gonna have to respond to, but I'm happy to wrap.
Okay.
I'm happy to come back and talk to the folks.
That would be good. We'll extend another invitation to you. In that case, would you like to go ahead and wrap up?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry again, Madam Chair. I wish I could stay. I would love to, but I'd be happy to come back. Again, I'm Raphael Warnock, and I'm excited about this run for the United States Senate. We have the best chance as Democrats that we've had in a very long time of winning both of these Senate seats in the state of Georgia. And if there's anything the other side fears, they fear a unified front around our effort to win this seat back in the special election for Democrats. And I think we can win both of these seats. There's a kind of synergy. We're the only state in the union this year with 2 Senate seats up. I'm running based on my long experience as somebody who's worked on healthcare reform. Again, I believe that healthcare is a human right, which is why I got arrested fighting to expand Medicaid in Georgia. I thought it was a moral disaster that we were leaving 400,000 people in the Medicaid gap back in 2014 based on sheer politics. I've been working on criminal justice reform and police brutality for years. Police brutality is as predictable as it is tragic. It's driven by the fact that we are the largest carceral state in the world. We warehouse 25% of the world's prisoners, which is why I convened at my church a national multi-faith conference last summer to talk about this issue. And you can find some of the ideas that we've been working on this as a faith community at endingmassincarceration.com. But I've been bringing leaders together for years to address these issues. Stacey Abrams and I have been working together for years to register voters in this state. As chair of the New Georgia Project, I registered some 400,000 new voters in our state. And the other side is nervous because they know that we absolutely can win this race if we're focused and keep our eyes on the prize and the larger target, which is why I'm running. The good news is that in spite of all of the voter suppression that's going on, and we intend to fight that, we had 1.3 Democrats show up in the Democratic primary, far more than they had on the other side. Stacey Abrams came within a point and a half of winning, about 55,000 votes. We've registered some 700,000 new voters in this state since then, half of whom are people of color and people under 30. We can win this race, which is why both of the Republicans on the other side are attacking me. They have both been attacking me on Twitter because they know that a victory is within range. I want to encourage those who are watching to stay in touch with us. We'd love to be in touch with you. You can find me at warnock4georgia.com. Again, I'm running because my highest ambition really is service. I believe Dr. King was right when he said that life's most pressing question is, what are you doing for others? I'd be honored to serve the people of Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists, for agreeing to spend your morning with us. We have some choices. And we, like I said, we have about 20 candidates in the special election, and we have 6 strong Democrats that have ingratiated us this morning with their time. If you want to know more about them, please go to their website. I want to also make a few announcements about our fundraisers, again, that we talked about earlier in the meeting. And the first one is a District 1 meet and greet with our local candidates. The link is in the most recent newsletter, but we'll send out another invite again. Also, it's the telethon. I noticed that many of you, and thank you for it, has said that I'm in with FCDC to help us raise at least $15,000 for our local candidates this election. We certainly do need your help, and thank you so very much. I apologize for not being able to get to all of your questions. Derek, you did an awesome job. Thank you for agreeing to be our moderator this morning. And also tune into our August meeting where we will have the U.S. House District 3 and District 13 candidates before us, and also the PSC commissioner candidates for District 1 and District 4. And so they'll be speaking to us in August. It looks like we've had another great meeting. I appreciate your time. If you will go ahead and sign up for the fundraisers again in the chat area, then we'll be getting back to you. Other than that, have a good morning. Thank you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. Have a good day.
Good
All
job,
right,
y'all.
take care.
Okay.